We originally had labeled this workshop as trauma-informed practice for herbalists, but as we were kind of looking at the nature of this workshop, and as I've developed it, realizing like this is really for anyone who's interested in learning about trauma-informed practice, who is in any kind of health field, preventative health or otherwise. So the information that we're going to be going over is not really going to so much target herbalism or any particular modality for that matter. I've taught this workshop also to massage therapists, and to see like all the ahas for folks was just so inspiring. So this information is really applicable to pretty much any profession that you're in, which is why I kind of want to get a sense of where everyone's coming from. I think throughout, some of the slides might say herbalist or herbalism, but again, it's really for any modality. So of course, a little disclaimer before we start, since we are talking about trauma, we want to make sure we stay within our scope with whatever our profession is. So always follow your ethical guidelines in whatever profession you're in. So, you know, if you're an herbalist, you know, we don't diagnose illness, disease, or any physical or mental disorder. We don't prescribe. And this is important within trauma-informed practice and within healthy boundary setting, which we're going to be talking about a lot, is not only for the safety of your clients, but also for the safety for yourself, and being able to say, I don't know. Let me find someone who knows. And making sure that your clients know that you're not going to give them any misinformation, and that they're safe with you, and that whatever information you give them, they can feel confident in your knowledge and confident in what you don't know. And I found that for myself is having the confidence to say, I don't know, being confident in what I don't know, confident in what I know. So who am I? My name is Naomi Bourassa. I'm a licensed massage therapist. I have a master's in social work. My pronouns are she, her. I have focused my studies in trauma-informed practice, and I've also worked within the LGBTQ+ community, which is why I like to know what your pronouns are. And that too is also trauma-informed, asking for folks' pronouns to make sure we're not misgendering and causing more harm. I started out as a licensed massage therapist in 2004, so I've been in it for a little while. And I first was exposed to trauma-informed practice through massage without really knowing that that's what was happening. As a receiver of massage throughout the years, noticing when trauma emerges during a massage treatment or massage session, and noticing emotions come up, noticing my own trauma responses. And that has been very enlightening over the years of learning about my own body and noticing what happens when trauma comes up. And then I got certified as a yoga instructor, and that took it to another level of really understanding how to, this word just came to me. I don't use it often. Transmute the trauma through movement and breathing and self-awareness of noticing what's happening. And through yoga, the practice for me taught me empowerment, self-empowerment, to be able to move my body or not move my body in a way that was comfortable for me, and to regain a sense of power over my own body and my own experience. And then I did the community herbalist training with Emily Ruff. And through that, also learning about, like, again, coming back to self-empowerment, learning how to care for myself in a way that was loving and compassionate and gentle. And I think that's what I've learned a lot from herbalism. And full disclosure, I don't practice herbalism in the community. It's more of a personal practice for myself and my family at this point. But through using herbs over the years, really using it as another tool to be gentle with myself. Because a lot of the time in trauma, there is a harshness of how we should be or who we should be. And so through all of those experiences and learning for myself more about trauma, I really wanted to know more about how can I serve my clients more competently. And I also had always had it in the back of my mind to try to be a counselor. So I looked at different pathways, and I chose to get a master's in social work because of like the more broad expansiveness of social work, and working with different populations to really get a better sense of what does trauma look like in different ways, not just like from my own like very narrow perspective of trauma for myself, but in different environments, what does that look like? So this has been like a really powerful journey of really getting a better sense of what does trauma mean and how does it affect each of us individually. And I'm super excited because there's just always so much to learn. And like, I know that like, I'm still very much in the beginning stages of this learning process. And I'm just so excited to share this information with you all because it is so powerful and really can help us in so many different ways. So I want to say thank you to Emily Ruff and for this Florida School of Holistic Living for inviting me to teach this workshop, and for Emily Ruff and all the work that she has done. I really, really admire and am inspired by her ability to weave decolonization practices throughout herbalism, which again, we'll get into a little bit, but racism, discrimination, those are also parts of trauma. And so we have to include that as well. These are the researchers who we're going to be talking about. All of the information in this workshop is not my own. It's, you know, other people's research that I've just kind of gathered together. So I'm going to offer you a resources list after the workshop. So you'll have these researchers and the websites I used and the videos that we'll be watching. So here's an idea of what we're going to be doing today. So first, we're going to talk about why are we talking about trauma? Why is it important? What is trauma? What does that mean? We are going to talk about ACEs, which is a study and an assessment that we're going to talk about the nervous system and the role that the nervous system plays in trauma. And then we're going to get more, so we're going to get the foundation of what is trauma, how does it affect us, and then what do we do with it? How do we apply this to our practice? We're going to talk about a lot about self-care, because as we do this work, we need to be taking care of ourselves. We're going to have breaks for discussion. We're going to take mindfulness breaks throughout the conversation. We're going to do group activities in breakout rooms. These are our class agreements. So remember, as I mentioned earlier, just talking about trauma can be triggering and can cause a trauma response. So I get the sense that everyone here has been doing some of your own personal work. So maybe you already have a good sense of what that might feel like for you if you feel triggered or feel a trauma response coming up. So I trust that you will take care of yourself. Be mindful of self-disclosure. So again, like I said, we'll pause the video. And then of course, anything shared by each other is confidential. This is the next one is big, to not respond to someone else's story. You know, as healers, we want people, we're here to help people feel better. And so there's this often a strong urge to try to soothe or make the person feel better in some way. When someone shares their story, it's a very courageous act, and they've already been through the experience. We don't have to do anything to fix it. What we can do is say, thank you so much for sharing that. And notice what it brings up for ourselves. Well, what does that bring up for me? And so we're going to keep coming back to this concept that we're not trying to fix anything. So we're not diagnosing trauma. Even if somebody shares a story with you that you're like, oh, that's trauma. We don't tell them that it's trauma unless they identify it as trauma. So we don't try to fix it. We don't try to label it. We don't try to make someone feel better. All we really do as healers, whatever your modality is we hold space. And that means allowing for the discomfort for ourselves and for our client to really sit with it, to explore the meaning of it for that person. So why are we talking about trauma? So these are some statistics that I gathered, not myself, not my own research, of course, but from the research I did of other folks' research. 62% of US adults have experienced at least one traumatic event. 25% of US adults have experienced 3 or more traumatic events. If you've ever had to take a statistics class like I did going into my bachelor's of social work, which was traumatic in and of itself, but very valuable in understanding how these statistics are gathered, we have to kind of take this at face value of who were they surveying, how many people were surveyed, what was the definition of trauma when taking this survey. So we have to take those things into account, because when we start looking at what trauma is and the different types of trauma, we might be like, these numbers seem kind of low. So just kind of keeping that in mind. Trauma can lead to chronic health conditions and health risk behaviors, which is what we're going to be talking about quite a bit with the ACEs study. Trauma affects the ability to connect in relationships and feel safe. So this is important as providers, that we are offering another opportunity for our clients to build safe, connective relationships. Supportive relationships can help heal the damage done by trauma. We're going to look at this further with Gabor Mate's work on how the root of trauma is disconnection from the self. And then as healthcare providers, we can help foster that safe relationship with healthy and appropriate boundaries. A lot of the time in trauma, people don't learn what boundaries are, or rather, the sense of a boundary is skewed and what's called porous. So we're going to look at different types of boundaries and explore that a little more. So the intention for this workshop is, again, we're not diagnosing, we're not trying to fix, we're not trying to do any of that. All we're doing is just trying to get a better understanding of trauma so that when we have a client come in, we can kind of have that trauma lens to look through. And when they're telling us their story, we can understand that there are pieces. It kind of helps bring the pieces together a little bit. When they say, well, when my childhood, I had this experience. And then later they're talking about how they can't sleep at night because of negative thought patterns. And so as an herbalist, let's say, that might be something a client might come in needing help sleeping. And while you're not there to, be their therapist about the trauma they experienced, you yourself can have an understanding like, okay, this could be a factor. These two things could be connected. And it's okay to give our clients education if they're open to it, if through conversation it seems that that's appropriate, and help them kind of see the connection. And then maybe they can go find a therapist to help process all of that. So trauma-informed practice is a mindset, not one particular approach. And this is something that I had to learn going through all these steps, because there was a time where I thought, okay, once I learn this thing, I'm going to be trauma informed. I'm going to have the tool. I'm going to fix it. And then with each tool that I gathered, realizing, oh, there's not one particular thing. And in fact, telling a client, this is going to fix you, is perpetuating that trauma. Because that takes the power of choice away from the client. One of the root pieces of trauma is that at the time of the traumatic event, the person did not have control. The sense of choice and control and agency was taken away. And so that's why it's so important that as we work with our clients, we come from a place of empowering the client. Here is a plethora of tools. Which ones do you want to use? Okay, you want that one? All right, let's work together and see how that goes. Okay, that didn't work. Okay, what do you want to try next? It's always giving the power back to the client to make that choice, because each person responds to different things differently. I love ginger. Ginger is one of my favorite herbal allies. Not everyone's going to like ginger. So, finding what works for that person. We're going to come back to this list at the end to review, but to kind of set ourselves up for what we're doing and not doing. So we're here to empower the client. We're here to listen, to educate, to be mindful and hold space, be compassionate, know your own boundaries, know your own trauma responses. So when they come up, it doesn't project onto the client. And most of all, letting go of our own ego, being humble, being able to say, I don't know. What we're not doing, we're not going to make assumptions. So again, if somebody tells you a story and immediately you're like, oh, that's trauma, don't assume that that client also identifies it as trauma. We don't diagnose, we don't try to fix. We definitely don't take responsibility for our client's trauma response. So as we're going through this workshop, we're learning about trauma to try to reduce causing more harm and inadvertently causing more trauma to a client. And we also can't tiptoe because we don't know what is going to be a trigger for someone. We can't know. There are some obvious things that, as our society learns more and more about trauma-informed practice, really, when you know, like using people's proper pronouns and things like that. But a trauma response can be any sense, any of the five senses: a smell, a taste, something you see, something you hear. So, you know, you can't always know. So that's part of practicing self-compassion with ourselves, so that if a client does have a trauma response, knowing like, okay, now I know we can work together and do better next time. Don't expect yourself to be an expert. And this is me personally. I have gathered all these tools hoping that, ooh, I'll be the expert. And the more I learn, realizing, oh, the less I know, which is kind of relieving in a sense. Don't expect every approach to work for every client. So this is a collaborative process.